Hello everyone, so this is one of the 6 videos per year where I summarize what's in foreign affairs, and I'm going to mention think tanks, and I'm going to go on to mention these several articles here. There's a lot more to foreign affairs than this, but these were the important articles. So link will be in the description to this. This is, a spreadsheet that contains almost 170 think tanks and NGOs mentioned in both Foreign Affairs and The Economist. Those are two of the publications that I keep up with almost religiously. So, India's feet of clay, it talks about the sort of danger of the Prime Minister Modi. He's a smart populist. Unlike, say, Nehru and Indira Gandhi, who were populist, but not necessarily as socially clever as Modi is. He engineered the social safety net. He's brought digitization and national identity scheme to India. And he's weaponized Hinduism, which is something that, his prior ministers did not. And here, I mentioned the article mentions majoritarianism, talks about Sri Lanka and how bad that was. Also, too, Modi has been very bad on environmental issues. Now, I would say to some degree he can be forgiven for that because ultimately he's pushing renewables pretty good. And let's admit it, that's where the real eye on the prize is. Also, too, it needs to be mentioned that when he was president of the state Gujarat, he initiated a pogrom that murdered a lot of Muslims. So this is definitely somebody to be scared of. Now, having that been said, India is a democracy. It shares a large border with China, and yes, we need them as an ally. But, it's a democracy that doesn't really share a lot of roots with the West. The age of immorality, and this kind of goes back to the previous article. So we need to build allies to, of course, diffuse tension and open the trading bloc, and we need not to rely too much on China. But at the same time, how do we do that with countries that decidedly lack Western values? Now, for much of the world, this is easy because much of the world isn't Western, and it doesn't necessarily pride itself on a series of values like, say, the Western world does, in particularly America with its freedoms of expression and whatnot. So how do we negotiate with regimes that are more sort of totalitarian? Of course, Saudi Arabia, I would argue, de facto monarch, and of course we mentioned India. India right now is still, for the most part, a democracy, although it's a democracy with some qualifications. We see lawfare employed there, some arrests made that maybe aren't justified to stop people from dissent and whatnot. So it's a very tricky question, and like I said, I hope whoever has the office, whether it's, Republicans or Democrats, they do a good job. Biden, he's got a lot on his plate. There are 4 rogue states out there: China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And Jake Sullivan, obviously, I hope he does a good job as well. Latin America, we can't miss out. Copper is going to be needed if we're ever going to get to renewables. South America has a lot of copper. Now, we've done a fair bit of meddling in that continent. A lot of it was, pre-Reagan administration and all that, but still, we did a lot of stuff there. And that means sometimes we're not trusted. Of course, China's also done some meddling there, and that hasn't turned out very well. We know that a lot of Latin American banks are seeking bailouts from the terms of the Belt and Roads Initiative. Also, it gives us an opportunity to do friendshoring. It really doesn't make a lot of news here, but South America is actually at the head of some innovations. They got some great labs for things like vaccines. They're looking into alternative fuels and whatnot. So it's actually a pretty interesting time for this continent that you could say didn't really attract much American attention. Spycraft and statecraft. This was kind of a bit of a pathetic piece, and it's pathetic because essentially all it amounted to was a want ad that was over 10 pages. You know, I mean, first off, if there's some really interesting, gritty stuff from from whoever works for the CIA, it's not going to make foreign affairs. It's just not. So you almost know by the fact that you see us, you know, if you haven't read Foreign Affairs, at the bottom of the first page of an essay, there's the person's name and what they do, and you know if CIA is in there, then at its base, it's not going to have any interesting details. William Burns is the head of the CIA. I forget what the official name is. I think it's Directorate of National Intelligence or Directorate of Central Intelligence. Director of Central Intelligence. It's changed throughout its day. So it mentions that there's a huge backlog. Again, with 4 rogue states, there's actually going to be a massive backlog. The apparatus of the intelligence offices did not have enough people for this. They haven't really had enough people for quite some time. In some areas or regions, I know for a fact there's about a 7-year backlog on intelligence, which is pretty bad if you're looking to put together a fast, actionable report. But there's nothing of interest here. Essentially, this was a huge plea to apply for jobs with intelligence agencies, but the intelligence agencies have not done themselves a favor, okay? The CIA has several black eyes, and the fact that, you know, they didn't hire people when they should have to absorb the oncoming problems, yeah, that's really bad. And I have here, you know, proves you do not need to read to succeed in America. I should have said proves you don't need to be able to write to succeed in America. William Burns, I'm going to go on record in saying he's one dumb schmuck. I mean, I know he got into the CIA and all that, but he's kind of a walking endorsement for every guy dumb schmucks, especially with this article.